You're listening to Paris: A State of Mind on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.
Welcome to Paris: A State of Mind. Join us as we talk about the good, the bad, the ins, the outs of property rentals and purchases in and around Paris. We'll have topics for renters, owners, and visitors, share questions we are regularly asked, and more. My name is Gail Boisclair of Perfectly Paris, and my co-host is Marie Pistinier of Lokim Paris. Be a part of it. Both of us are proud members of the SPLM, the first representative body of furnished rental professionals. Hello, hello, hello. Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
Hello, Gail. How are you doing?
I'm fine and fit as a fiddle. I should look up that expression. What is fit as a fiddle? How are you, Marie?
I'm very good, thank you. Very impatient to record this podcast, which sounds to be very interesting today.
Well, yes, our listeners might be really interested to hear what we're going to be talking about in our brand new series. We've talked a lot about all kinds of different things related to Paris, but I think the one thing that we never did was kind of give people an introduction to the different arrondissements or districts of Paris and how Paris is actually structured, which is definitely related to maybe where you might want to live or buy. So I think that this is the start of a multi-part series that we're going to do called the Arrondissements of Paris. And we have a lot of great guests that we're going to have that will join us in future episodes in this series to talk about their favorite stuff about arrondissements. Don't you think that's great?
Yeah, I think that's great. But we have to make a little disclaimer, I think, and to precise that this is what our views of Paris, and this will be completely biased. Like, we completely add the way we are going to talk to you about Paris and the different arrondissements and the different part of the city we love and like or dislike sometimes, or not so fond of, are going to be fully depending on us. But feel free to reach out if you need some more explanation on that.
Well, and I do think that we're trying really hard to be somewhat objective. You know, there are some arrondissements that I'm not really keen on at all, but I will only try to say nice things. I'll try to be nice. As you know, we grew up saying if you can't say something nice about someone, don't say anything at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but each arrondissement is kind of like a living person with its own persona and character. And I guess that's part of why we're going to do this. So they're kind of people too, right?
So for a start, should you start explaining for those who don't know yet how it's set up, how we do picture Paris and how we do find our way around?
Oh yeah. Metro. So yeah, unlike a lot of cities, especially for people that are from more modern countries like Canada and the US, Australia, what have you, cities that are oftentimes laid out very grid-like and easy to find. Like I'm from Toronto, so everything is north, south, east, or west. All of those ideas go out of the window in Paris because it's nothing like that. So I guess as a result, Paris is laid out in a different way, and it's all for the start of Paris because Paris started in the very center. You know, so, and it worked out and grew as Paris grew. It became a bigger and bigger circle, escargot, really. If you look at an escargot shell, that's what Paris really looks like now, with all the arrondissements as they developed over time. So we've got 10 districts in 20 districts. What am I talking about? 10. We've got
Yes, you're getting lost already. Be careful.
So, yeah, 20 arrondissements in Paris, and they're all numbered from 1 to 20. And when we look on a map, we can see that it is like a whole escargot, a swirl that gets bigger with the double digits being on the outside and the single digits being in the very center. And I think a lot of people use numbers to describe the arrondissements, but a lot of them have like they use like a name, like an area, because technically each district does have kind of like an administrative name, and within each district they have like areas within each district that also have administrative names as well too. But that's probably getting way too advanced for anyone.
Yeah, and you can add also that each arrondissement, except for the first four arrondissements, they do have their own city hall. Like you have the city hall of Paris, and inside you have also mayors of arrondissement. So you have a kind of local life inside the local.
Well, and I think that that in itself explains why people are so kind of in love with their own arrondissement, because each arrondissement is almost kind of like a small town in some respects, because you have your own mayor, you've got all of your own stuff that you like in your local area, and heaven forbid that you should go and ever move to another arrondissement. People used to always make fun of me because I never used to cross the Seine.
Yeah, but now you do.
And now I do nonstop.
Okay, speaking about crossing the Seine, what would be the difference between left and right bank? Because I know that I remember when I used to make a lot of vacation rentals, that the tourists wanted to be absolutely in the left bank, and they have all these pictures, but they couldn't picture where it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I do agree because, yeah, so we've got Paris divided into the 20 arrondissements, and then we've got the Seine that cuts Paris kind of through the middle, flows through the middle, and we've got the right bank, the rive droite, and the left bank, rive gauche. And that is sometimes how people identify themselves as well, too. They'll say, oh, I'm totally rive gauche or I'm totally rive droite. And those are the areas that are south and north of the Seine.
In fact, you have to picture yourself entering Paris from the east side. And then you have your right, which is on the north of Paris, and the south, and on the south you have the left bank.
Exactly. And I think that the population is kind of more or less split up. It's kind of like half and half almost. You've got some arrondissements in the south part of Paris that are much larger than others, and same for the north. Anyway, having said all of that, we should get down to the nitty gritty, because people know that Paris is Paris, but some people don't have any idea about what maybe each arrondissement is kind of known for and so on. So let's kind of break it down. And Marie, what do you think about, say, what is the first arrondissement, the second arrondissement? What does it mean to you? How would you describe those areas?
So first, my office, I've lived in the second arrondissement for more than 15 years, and my office is in the second arrondissement. So I'm pretty in love with this arrondissement. I was very sad to leave it, even though I'm very happy with the new one. And for me, those arrondissements are the Louvre, of course. This is like one of the main things. The previous stock exchange, for example, and I would add probably Châtelet-Léal, like, the big mall, which has been fully renovated, and that gives really a new shape of this area, like the very center of Paris, which used to be the belly of Paris. This is how we used to name it. So those two arrondissements are pretty small. Each are at the limit with the nines on the top of the arrondissement, and maybe a little the 10 for a part of the second arrondissement. They have a lot of shops, and of course we miss the Montorgueil area, which is very well known, and it's where you have a lot of tourists who come there. There's a lot of touristic attraction. There is a lot of museum, including the famous Louvre, and comparing maybe few apartments, even though in for my business, we used to have a lot of properties around this. It's very much requested, and it's pretty trendy. even though a part of the area tends to be shut down at night, with only few restaurants and shops who stay up, like in the Rue Tiquetonne or the Rue Montorgueil. Apart from that, after a certain time, things are going back to quiet. So this would be for me the main thing. What about you for the first and second arrondissement?
Well, that's everything you said was totally true. I never go to Bourse actually like the second arrondissement very often, except an apartment that I have kind of in that area that's really great and everybody loves it because, as you say, it's very central. And I feel like I hardly ever go to the first either. I have no particular reason. I guess it's just because it's a nice area, but I never seem to really have anything to do in that thing. Okay, I have to preface all of this that it's a hard time sometimes to get me out of my own area. And this is something that comes up with people that live in a certain arrondissement. We get stuck in our own area.
Yeah, sometimes. And it's true that when I had to move out from the second arrondissement, I was always thinking, okay, it's going to be tough. And it was hard for me to picture the way things will be. It's funny, but it's ridiculous in some way because yes, I found plenty of new things to do and to do around, but it was fun. What about let's go to the next online, like the third arrondissement and the fourth arrondissement. What are for you what's talking to you when we talk about those arrondissements?
Well, definitely, of course, the Marais. Obviously, the Marais and most certainly Hotel de Ville, because the third arrondissement around Temple and things like that, it's very, very well known by everybody outside of Paris and inside of Paris, call it the Marais, which actually is like a swamp, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not really a swamp.
You are expecting to see Shrek coming up from the Marais. But around Carreau du Temple, it's a bit different. Like the north of the Marais, the original Marais was more like the fourth arrondissement. And the town, but you have at Carreau du Temple, for example, you have the Marché des Enfants Rouges, which is a little open air market with food you can get. Very nice.
It's always so busy there. It's there's so many people that go to that.
To that market, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the Carreau du Temple is super interesting as well, too. It's a very walkable neighborhood. There's plenty of places you can go around. It's very, I think, busy. There's always people in the streets in the third and the fourth. No?
Yes, very busy, complicated to park when you have a car. So I would definitely told you to do not go there. It will include also the some island, like the Ile Saint-Louis, for example. And it's a very interesting area. Usually the prices, going back to a bit of real estate information, those areas are pretty expensive because it's pretty much request. And in terms of sale, for example, it's rentals. It's complicated to have a lot of apartments available in that areas. And on the sales, usually it's part where the prices are one of the highest in Paris.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you say, the fourth does include the two islands of Paris, Ile de la Cité, home of Notre Dame de Paris, and Ile Saint Louis. I like those two neighborhoods. I would say that between the first and the second and the third and the fourth, I actually like hanging out in the third and the fourth. They're fun. I don't know how I'd feel because they are such busy areas. I don't know how I'd feel about living in it because obviously I like it kind of quiet in the evening.
But for example, I'm living in the fourth, but I'm away from the big crowd, so it's very quiet, and there is several schools, and there is also a kind of village life, like you have your little shops around the corner, and you have everything. So it can be on some like on Rue de Rivoli, Rue Saint-Antoine, it can be very busy, very crowded. And if you go a little away from that, you can access some interesting space. But there is not that much availability in terms of housing, and it's pretty high. So this would be like the downside of those areas.
And they're also the first four arrondissements are also they're the smallest size-wise in terms of square kilometers. So yes, it's very packed.
If you are enjoying this episode of Paris State of Mind, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, The Heart of You. Join Annette as she helps you explore your soul through intuition, spirituality, and more. Paris State of Mind will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And now back to Paris, a state of mind. I guess that takes us now to the 5th, right? Around the Pantheon and everything, the Latin Quarter.
Yeah, what we call the Latin Quarter. For me, it's funny because I used to promote this a lot when I was doing vacation rentals, like the 5th arrondissement, close to the Pantheon, but there is also all those little narrow streets close to La Rue de la Huchette and all those students area where it's packed with tourists. And I remember that we promote it a lot, but personally being on Rue de la Huchette I have a friend who used to have an apartment facing the street of the Rue de la Huchette. And she was so annoyed. Every day she has all those guys who are asking her to come to the restaurant. Every night you had all the plates which were crashed on the floor and everything. So it's a very specific thing, but for me, it's more like, it's not the Pantheon. It's more like all those narrow streets like La Rue Saint-Séverin, the Boulevard Saint-Michel, and like the student areas of it. And this used to be like, you really want to be like on the courtyard view. You want to, sometimes people want to absolutely face the street, face the city and see it. When you are close to the Rue de la Huchette, you don't want to face the city. You want the city. You want to be directly on the courtyard to have some quietness.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that would be the hardest thing. You're right. Living on a busy street like that. It's a nice area though. It's some of the areas, like you said, they're very like cute little streets and things like that. But then they've got other big streets like, I don't know, Rue des Écoles, that's a little more, hoity-toity. Hoity-toity. I like that word, hoity-toity. But yeah, it's a nice area. But yes, you're right, courtyard building. I guess then now this takes us to one of the most popular or well-known areas in Paris, which is the 6th, don't you think?
Exactly. Yes. And for me, I guess that it would be the same for you. The Luxembourg Garden would be like the heart of the sixth arrondissement. And it's true that it's one of the area, the most requested area for people coming from abroad, having some cliche in mind. The sixth arrondissement is always the first to be asked for. Usually, after a while, depending on the budget, sometimes the search is expanding to other areas of Paris, because it's true that those areas are very expensive.
Yeah, I like the 6th as well, but yes, you're right. It's more expensive. It's funny, when I first moved to Paris, my closest friend at the time lived in the 6th. So I used to go down there a lot, and there's a lot of great places to go out for dinner and so on and so forth. We used to hang out in bars, but actual nightlife, I find in the 6th, funnily enough, is not really very busy. I remember one time trying to find, I don't know, a place to go out dancing and stuff like that, and it was really hard to find a place in the 6th.
Yeah, the fifth, when I was younger than what I am now, even though I feel I'm very young, we used to go out in the fifth. This was the place where we would hang around. It was really the area.
Yeah, the 5th would have definitely been more hopping, still is. And now another arrondissement that's very well known by foreigners is the 7th.
Yeah, seventh. This is one of, also families wants to. I remember, Sam, going back to vacation rental, people wanted like a 2-bedroom apartment in the seventh. It's very hard to find. It's like one of the search, the golden search. It's really complicated. And the most known items would be the Eiffel Tower. It's like the Tour Eiffel is like the very well known monument. Like you have the Invalides, but it's true that when you want to be in the seventh, this would be probably what you'd like to target.
Yeah, and I think that the 7th really was made famous for tourists in many ways thanks to Rick Steves, the travel writer and tour guide and so on and so forth, because he often promoted the 7th before anyone else would.
Yeah.
And I do have an apartment in the 7th, and so I have been on the very well-known Rue Claire. And funnily enough, I think that in my mind, I thought that it would be really not so interesting, but it's got a good bit of local life in the 7th,
exactly.
more so than what I had thought that I would see. And definitely the people that I saw at the cafes and the restaurants seemed to be people like regular residents and things, and it wasn't at all as like touristy as I thought it would be.
Yeah, but it's true that we have our own cliches even when we were Parisian. Like we have our own
Yeah.
cliches on Paris. For me, the seventh, I would say like older people, more classical. But it's true like Le Rue de Clair, and you have some nice market and nice shops, and it's very interesting. What about the very famous 8th arrondissement?
Oh, yeah. The eighth. As soon as I say the eighth, the first thing that comes into mind is Saint Honoré and a bunch of designer shops, or all of the high end boutiques that they have around the Champs Elysees. That's the eighth. That's what I hear straight away in my brain. It's definitely the place where you want to go if you have a love for anything shishi.
Yeah, this is the same ideas I have. Like Champs-Élysées, it's a must see, a must do when you are traveling to Paris. And if you are, but if you, but this is my moment of critics. Like, but the ace is very wide. In fact, we think about this very lively area. And for me, it's not at all a place where I'd like to stay, like for a few days or even for a few months. I would be like the Champs-Élysées. I would prefer to be a little away from that. And there is other portion of the eight which are away from that. But those, they call that the Golden Triangle. And it's place where you have the most expensive hotel room, the most expensive apartments and everything. And it's, yeah. But it has been a bit like, with all the jet sets and everything. It's not chic. I mean, like my opinion as a Parisian would be like, it's not that chic, even though you do have some very interesting thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. Well, especially about the Champs Elysees. I always tell people that no French person ever walks down the Champs Elysees, ever,
Yes,
unless maybe they work there.
yes, it's or if you want to have some. I love, for example, one of the things that I love is that during the winter is like taking a cab and passing through the Champs-Élysées. You have all those lights during like Christmas time and everything. So you have all this kind of touristic
Gorgeous.
touristic
Yeah.
way to see around. But it's true that I will not. I have no. You don't go there like, okay, I need to shop and I need to go to this particular area, because you can find the shops everywhere else.
There is a part of the eighth, though, that I really love. It's fairly residential, though, and maybe lesser known. And the area is kind of called Quartier de l'Europe. So it's just the area that borders the 17th and the 9th, around Boulevard de Batignolles and Metro Europe, for example. That's really nice. That's a nice area. And I think that that's definitely more of a neighborhood. They've got a lot of great places to eat, plenty of restaurant selection. So that's a different part of the eighth that's completely apart from the Chichi part of it, the Champs-Élysées part of it. It's a part of the eighth that I quite like.
So what about the ninth arrondissement?
That's still one of my favorite ones, really, because it's kind of got everything. The ninth, obviously, you can think about maybe the Opera Garnier. You think of the big
Les grands magasins.
shops that are there. Yeah, the Galerie Lafayette, Le Printemps. Not that we're trying to do advertising for them or
No.
anything, but but I do think you think about that a lot. However, there are so many areas of the ninth that, like around Rue des Martyrs, that's kind of its own little village area with these quaint shops, and it's very bustling and busy. So there's parts of the ninth that I like.
You know, all those passages that you have from the second to the ninth arrondissement, and you have
Yeah.
all these little alley which are covered and with a lot of shops and everything. I love this area, but it's true that it's a lot of business area. Like there is portion where you have a lot of theater as well. You have a lot of places for musical, for example. There is some very nice thing. But and it's very close from the second arrondissement. It's very easy to move around, and the subway stops are good, because sometimes when you look for an apartment, for example, you are in some part of the 15 or 16. We'll go there later. sometimes you can walk like 15 minutes before you get at least a subway stop. So it can be very complicated. This is one of the parts that you'd like to make sure you are aware of.
I mean, in the ninth, too, it's also a good area for anyone who's a musician because they've got all those music shops that sell like guitars, drums, this, that, everything under the sun. What else can I say about the ninth? It actually has a lot of restaurants that I like. It's got, can I say my favorite restaurant? Shout out to my favorite restaurant.
Yeah.
So it's got my favorite restaurant, a very classic French bistro called Le Bon Georges, ran by my friend Benoit, and it's right by Metro St. George. It's got these great little hidden areas, and that whole area around Metro St. George is also really charming as well, too.
Yeah. It's complicated to get an apartment around.
Oh, I can imagine.
Not that much available. It's complicated.
Yeah.
On the sale or on the rental market, it's very rare to have places available, especially for families. A lot of families want to be there, but it's like I remember this apartment, and I think that you know maybe the one I'm talking about, with 2 bedrooms, and it was in the Rue Rochechouart, I think, and I was like overwhelmed by the calls from the time I put the ads online and the same day I got like 15 calls. I had people wanted to view it the same day. I view it like I posted on them like at 11. At 3 p.m. I said, okay, I can make some viewings at 5 p.m. And at 6 I had an offer directly in my hand it was like close to €1,000,000, and it was a direct offer without any loan. So this was crazy.
Yeah.
People were crazy, and this was a few years back.
Yeah, I totally remember that because it was a corner apartment on top of all of that. So it had really nice exposure to the street. The views were great. And it was in a super quiet building. I'm not surprised that you were called like non-stop.
So what about the 10th to end this premiere podcast?
Well, I don't know. Should we get into the 10th or should we just stop and right here and take it on? Because we've already been blabbing for almost half an hour.
Okay, so let's stop and let's talk about the 10th the next time.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to introducing you to the other arrondissements in our next episode. And thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Gail. Talk to you soon.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Paris, A State of Mind, featuring Gail of Perfectly Paris and Marie of Loquim, both who are founding members of the SPLM. Paris, A State of Mind is produced by Paris Underground Radio. The music, Jazz in Paris, is by Media Right Productions. For more information on this show and others, go to parisundergroundradio.com.
This episode of Paris, A State of Mind was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio.